Hello. I hope you are staying safe at home. It is really a good occasion for me to talk to you. My name is Lbnى Abdالتواب Yusuf, and as you see, I am sharing a screen that introduces the title of the first lecture. Now, this is a writing course, and it is very important for you to know that we cannot write without reading. We read to gain information. We read to understand different points of view about a certain issue. And after we read, we have our own point of view. So it is very important to understand the link between reading and writing. Now, of course, we read and understand what other writers say, but we never copy what they say without mentioning their name, where they published what they have written. And therefore, if we do not mention the name of the person who introduced us to a certain idea, we are making a very big mistake. And this mistake is like stealing, because in this case, you are stealing the ideas of someone and you are pretending they are your own ideas. This is called plagiarism. السرقة العلمية. And of course, we don't want to be plagiarists. Now, I am going to give you a talk today about a pandemic that is global, that is in the whole world. And this is a problem that has never happened before. In the past, when a disease hits a country, it does not necessarily hit the countries next to it. But in the world we live in today, a pandemic means وباء, a pandemic hits the whole earth. Now, when we talk about reading and writing, we know that there are rules of grammar, rules of structure, and these rules are not only rules in English, but these are rules in English, in Arabic, in French, in all the languages of the world. So every language has its own rules. Now, when we write in English, we generally write to introduce our reader to our point of view. Now, the coronavirus pandemic has shown the world that there are many points of view about this pandemic. And the research that is being done is still ongoing because we do not know all the details about this pandemic. And we as a world are learning more every day. And scientists in America, in England, in France, in Germany, in China, and in Egypt are all working on understanding this pandemic in order to be able to deal with it and in order to be able to cure the sick people who get this disease. Now, I am going to move on to the second slide, and the second slide has the table of contents. And it tells us that when we're dealing with reading and writing, we are looking at controversial issues. What is a controversial issue? It is a point of view that can have different parties involved. Some agree with an issue, some do not agree, some agree with some aspects of the issue, some do not agree. So a controversial issue is an issue that involves points of view. موضوعات تحتمل الجدل والاختلاف في وجهات النظر. لذلك لابد أن نقرأ عن الاختلافات في وجهات النظر لكي نستطيع نحن أن تكون لنا وجهة نظرنا الخاصة. ولن نتمكن من أن تكون لدينا وجهة نظر خاصة بدون القراءة عن الوجهات النظر المختلفة. باللغة الإنجليزية الكلمة التي نستخدمها هي كلمة argument. Now, what is an argument? Now, when we ask a what is question, it means we are asking for a definition. محتاجين تعريف لما هي الارجيومنت. Now, the word argument, if we go to the dictionary, we will discover that it can mean to have a fight, to have a conflict. وبالعربي البسيط بما إننا في قسم اللغة الإنجليزية والترجمة، بالعربي البسيط ممكن كلمة argue to argue يعني يتخانق، لكن إحنا ما بنستخدمش المصطلح هنا بهذا المعنى على الإطلاق، بنستخدمه بمعنى مختلف. إيه المعنى المختلف اللي بنستخدمه بيه؟ معنى إنه الواحد يبقى عنده وجهة نظر يدافع عنها بالحجة وبالتحليل وبالدراسة. Okay, so we're going to say this in English. To write an argument means to have a point of view, to have a position, and in order to have a point of view and a position, you have to support this point of view. Now, how do you support this point of view? I am going to tell you in a minute on slide 3. Now, before I move on to slide 3, the piece of reading we are going to look at today is from the BBC News. And the title of this piece of reading is called How to Protect Your Mental Health. Now, how to protect your mental health means that we're asking a broader question. And the question is, in case of the coronavirus, should we protect ourselves physically only, or should we protect ourselves physically as well as psychologically as well as mentally, all together? Now, Kirsty Brewer is the name of the writer of this article, and she wrote it and published it in BBC News on the 16th of March 2020. Now, before we look at this article, let me go back to the idea of an argument and how do we write an argument, and what are the different modes of writing that we use in order to support an argument. Now, this is an issue that is extremely important, and you will find a lot of explanations on this issue in your book and in the lectures that I have recorded before. Now, let me move to slide 3. And slide 3 says that in order to discuss controversial issues, we must read in order to be able to write about them. So, in order to have an argument, in order to have a position, in order to have a point of view, you have to have information. Where do you get this information? You get it from reading. Now, how do you support your point of view? When we say support a point of view, it means that you know that the person who's going to read your piece of writing has a different point of view. So what you need to do is you are going to convince your reader with your point of view. And in order to convince your reader, you have to give your reader evidence and you have to provide analysis. بمعنى علشان نقنع حد بوجهة نظرنا لازم نديه الحجة ولازم نحلل الحجة. Okay, how do we do that? There are 7 ways to do this. And as I told you before, these are discussed in the lectures and in the book that you have. Now, what are the different ways of convincing a reader? What are the different modes of writing? There is definition, التعريف, comparison and contrast, المقارنة, cause and effect, الحدث وأثر الحدث, classification, التصنيف. هنصنف بعض الأشياء علشان نثبت إنه النقطة بتاعتنا أو الاختيار اللي احنا هنختاره في التصنيف هو الاختيار الملائم. process، علشان نحل مشكلة محتاجين خطوات. process step 1 step 2 step 3. وممكن برضو علشان نثبت رأينا نحكي قصة. So we produce a narrative, a story, in order to convince our reader. We can also give a description. So we are going to see how the writer, I told you the name before, Kirsty Brewer, how Kirsty Brewer discusses the argument how to protect your mental health. Now, before we go to the article, it's important, as we said in slide 3, to give definitions. إننا ندي تعريفات. الكلمة الأولى اللي هنعرفها pandemic. Coronavirus pandemic. Now, why do we start with pandemic? Because pandemic is the noun and coronavirus is the adjective. So what is a pandemic? بالعربي ببساطة وباء. A pandemic is a disease that affects a country, and in the case of the coronavirus, it is affecting the whole world. Now, what is the coronavirus, the COVID-19? It is an infectious disease. بمعنى هو مرض معدي. And what does this disease affect in the body? It affects the respiratory system, the system that allows us to breathe. Now, what did the World Health Organization say about the coronavirus? منظمة الصحة العالمية، بما إن ده وباء عالمي، لازم المنظمات الدولية يبقى لها دور في الموضوع. على الويب سايت بتاعهم اللي عنوانه موجود على السلايد، ال WHO, the World Health Organization, said, global leaders unite to ensure everyone, everywhere, can access new vaccines, tests, and treatments for COVID-19. بمعنى إنه لابد أن يتدخل كل زعماء العالم ويتعاونوا لكي يكون كل البني آدمين على الكرة الأرضية عندهم التطعيمات ووسائل الاختبارات والعلاج لهذا المرض اللعين طبعا. Now, when I move to slide 5, I introduce the idea of how do we protect ourselves from my point of view. In order to protect ourselves, we have, from my point of view, two important issues. We protect our body physically, and we protect our mind and our heart psychologically and mentally. So, I have a list under each. How do we protect our body? We stay clean. We eat healthy food. We protect ourselves from getting a cold. We protect ourselves from getting infected. And we protect our other people. If we are infected, we don't want them to get infected as well. So, this is the first step, to protect ourselves physically. But then there's also another extremely important step, because the human being is not only body, but is body and heart and mind and emotions. So when we are in a difficult period like the one we are in, we need to stay in touch with family and friends. We need people who support us. Now, we don't need to see them, because if we are infected or if they are infected, we don't want the pandemic to spread more. So we can get in touch with them through a lot of ways, through the telephone, through the mobile, through the internet. Now, we also protect ourselves psychologically by studying, working, by doing what we are supposed to do so that we do not get bored, we do not become anxious. Now, we also protect ourselves psychologically by praying to God, by reading our holy books, by resting, by listening to music, by watching television, by avoiding stress, and also by reading and writing. Now, reading can distract us from the tension we are living in, and writing can also help us in thinking clearly about our problems. Now, we move on to Kirsty Brewer, who says that we can protect our mental health in different ways, all right? So I have them here for you in each way in a different slide. Now, if listening to the news a lot annoys you, Kirsty Brewer suggests that we limit the news and we should be careful about what we read. If what we read annoys us, we should not read it. All right? Now, what does she do to support her argument? She narrates a story and she introduces a quotation. What is the story that she narrates? It's a very short story. She says, reading lots of news about coronavirus has led to panic attacks for Nick, a father of two from Kent who lives with anxiety. Now, she gave us the name of someone. She told us that this is a father and that he is always anxious. Anxious means worried, tense. So Nick said, when I am feeling anxious, my thoughts can spiral out of control. So when he is tense, he gets very bad ideas, all right? And these ideas lead him to think about a lot of problems, okay? So this can make him sick. Nick is worried about himself, about his children, about his parents, and about other old people. So it's a good idea that Nick limits the news he listens to in order not to become tense. التوتر في الحالة دي ما بيحلش حاجة. Now, the second point that Kirsty Brewer uses to support her argument is have breaks from social media and mute things which are triggering. يعني مش لازم نقعد على التلفزيون طول الوقت، على السوشيال ميديا طول الوقت، خصوصا لو الحاجات دي بتوترنا. يعني ايه triggering؟ يعني causing tension. So what does Kirsty Brewer do? She gives a description and a quotation. Alison, a girl who is 24 years, she lives in Manchester in England. She has health anxiety. So she becomes anxious, she becomes worried, بتقلق خالص، وبالتالي محتاجة تهدي نفسها ومحتاجة تقلل الحاجات اللي بتعمل لها توتر، اللي بتعمل لها tension. So Kirsty quotes Allison, who says, "A month ago I was clicking on hashtags and seeing all this unverified conspiracy rubbish." Now في موضوع الكورونا ده في نظريات كتير. نظرية إن الصين عملت الموضوع البيولوجيكال ويبن ده علشان تنتصر على العالم، وإنه النظريات دي نظريات الله أعلم هي صحيحة ولا مش صحيحة. لما الواحد يقعد يسمع النظريات دي ممكن توتره وممكن تخليه يعيا. alright؟ فكيرستي برور بتقترح إنه have breaks from social media and mute things which are triggering. mute يعني نعملهم silent. alright؟ علشان ما نتوترش. Number 3, wash your hands but not excessively. طيب هنا كيرستي برور بتربط بين what is physical and what is mental. لأن washing the hands is physical, but if you keep washing your hands all the time, you become obsessed. What does that mean? It means you have fear, all right? And fear can become very harmful, all right? So here, Kirsty Brewer is using cause and effect. الحدث وأثر الحدث. يعني لما نقعد نغسل إيدنا طول الوقت، نغسل إيدنا، هيبقى مسيطر علينا المشكلة، وبالتالي تخلينا نكتئب ويجيلنا مرض اسمه obsessive compulsive disorder. المرض ده من الخوف. من كتر ما الواحد يسمع اغسل ايدك اغسل ايدك اغسل ايدك، يبتدي يغسل ايده لدرجة انها تعمل له خوف وتوتر فيجيله مرض نفسي. طيب بتستشهد كيرستي برور بكاتبة اسمها ليلي بايلي، كتبت كتاب اسمه Because We Are Bad عن الobsessive compulsive disorder، وبتقول إنه it is really difficult because I now have to do some of the behaviors that I've been avoiding. يعني في ليلي بايلي بتتوتر جامد، والتوتر ده زاد لما قعدت تسمع اغسل ايدك اغسل ايدك اغسل ايدك. alright? So be careful. You don't want to be psychologically sick because of what is going on in the world. Now, we still have the reason number 4, the reason number 5, and the reason number 6 from Kirsty Brewer. So we are going to stop here and we're going to continue in our second part of the first lecture.